So hello everyone, and welcome to this special video that I'm going to be doing for 3rd birthday for Parasite Eve, The Black Shadow. And I want to use this video as an opportunity for me to kind of talk about my thoughts, experiences of the game so far. I don't do this for a lot of games that I cover on this channel, but I'm well aware that this title had some divided reactions on its release a decade or so ago, and even now, with the benefit of time and hindsight, it still has quite a bitter taste for some. I know one person who watched lots of my channel who's told me they just physically do not want to watch this series because of the game. I think specifically talking about probably the shower cutscene. I don't know, it didn't specify which one. But I want to use this as an opportunity to talk about what I think of this game so far, because I feel like we've gone far enough being a couple of chapters in. I think I've got a pretty good feel for where it is, and for me it's definitely kind of ish similar, I guess. There's some stuff I'm definitely quite enjoying, but there's some other stuff as well that I'm kind of a bit circumspect about. And I am also knowing what this game kind of is and the reaction it's got. I am curious to know what you guys make of it as well. This isn't just like, one of those end of video call to actions. What do you think? Put it in the comment section below. I mean, it kind of is that, I guess, but I am legitimately curious to know what people have made of this so far, whether you've played this game before, whether you've never seen it before, whether it's your first time experiencing the game as well. I'm always interested in titles like this to where they go. Anyways, my thoughts. Also, if you're wondering, the music is out of phase from Parasite Eve 1. One of my favourite tracks in the series. Love it to bits. Seemed pretty suiting for this. So, let's start with, I think, probably the most obvious stuff, and actually the music's a good shout for that, and that is the music of this game. I've said multiple times, I think the music of this game has been really well put together. Definitely is some influence from the previous game of the series with some remix tracks. I think it's great. There's definitely some influence of the era. Again, Square were in the midst of doing Final Fantasy 13 at this time. Final Fantasy Type 0, I believe, was also being developed at the same time that this was too, so you can definitely get a lot of elements of that style of music coming across to this as well. But I think they've done a really, really good job so far. Lots of good tracks, even if one or two of the battle themes are maybe a bit kind of happy-go-lucky, I guess. It's like, it's not a big deal. So I think they've done a really good job for that. Also, as I've mentioned as well, I think graphically the game definitely is pretty damn good. Remember, this game is like 12 years old and was designed for a portable device. I think, I have the benefits of like some tweaking and modern stuff, which helps, but I do think they've done a really good job. I read apparently when they were developing this game, what they did over at Square was that they basically designed the game as if it was going to be released on like a PlayStation 3, and then worked that into putting it onto a PSP. I don't know if that's 100% true or not, but apparently that's what I've read, which is an interesting way to go about it, but might explain why the graphic quality, certainly for its time, I think was probably well ahead of most things around it, and I think even, nowadays still holds, I think, pretty damn decently. But I've talked about those two plenty. I've got some things to mention about. We'll go into more in-depth mechanics, I guess. You've got like the weapon upgrading system, which of course has been featured across the series. It's nice to see that return. It is in a bit more of a slightly minimized form, I guess. There's only so much you can play around with it, and again, it's a portable console. There's only so much you can do with some of these things, but I think it's totally fine. The over energy system, I think it's okay, I guess. I can't really sit here and be like kind of overly excited about it, honestly. Again, I think like, having it kind of in there, as a chance to kind of, obviously to have skills on the side to boost your way going back, it's good. I like the idea that you kind of like customize it a little bit to whatever you want. But the problem I do have with it is that, it does come across as kind of random, even though that I know it's not random, and I know that if you do combine certain types of energy chips, you will mutate into specifically other types of energy chips, and I know that information exists out there. But I think my issue with the system is the whole like pressing square to re-roll your RNG. And I do feel that what the system comes down to that they've got here is basically how many times are you willing to do that. If you're willing to just sit there for like 5 minutes pressing the square button, re-rolling to get exactly what you want, if you're willing to do that, then cool, I guess. But I think for a lot of folks, your mileage is going to vary, and I do think it's going to veer on the, it's alright sort of thing. I think there might have been some more creative ways to have the counter system. I do like that they have something for it, as opposed to, say, previous games, where it's just kind of like, you just gain the levels and you gain the magic as you go. Which in itself is a little bit archaic, I suppose, now. So having something to kind of mess around on the side, I guess, is cool. But, you know, it's, I don't know, I don't find myself overly inspired by it. But I do like that it does benefit a variety of things. Obviously, your own overdrive attack, stuff like that, your general being able to dive around. I do think it's an interesting feature for the game. I think it's alright. I think having, like, the various other troops around the battlefield that you can kind of move around as you need to and get crossfires going, I think it's nice, you know, and I think it adds a bit of dynamism. Dynamism, I think that might be the word I'm looking for combat. Which in itself is, I think, somewhat limited by the platform. Another thing I was reading about for the development of this game is, like, the whole, like, obviously it's a third-person shooter largely, but, like, obviously the combat is all lock-on. Now, in an ideal world, you wouldn't have lock-on aiming like you do in this game, but again, you're playing on a PlayStation Portable 12 years ago. That just comes with the system, and I think if you wanted to get around that, you'd have not done it for PSP. It's kind of a shame, actually. I do reckon if a game like this came out, like, on a proper, like, a full-on platform, I actually would have been really interested to see some of the things they could have changed for that, and I think it actually could have been, like, really, really good. But I think definitely being PSP does force some degree of limitations that they've had to work around. I think they've done a decent job on the combat side overall. Some of the feels you find themselves are kind of like, you know, and ultimately it's a lot shooting. And, you know, depends how much you're willing to kind of get into that and how much you're willing to, you know, put up with that, I suppose. I don't want to say that I think it's going to veer on repetitive, but I guess you can only shoot things in so many different ways, right? So, depends how you see it. Now, there is a couple of things that I do want to address in a bit of a finer light. First off is the story for this game. It's a bit of a weird one. I think any game that delves into kind of a time travel sort of idea, it's always a little tricky, and I do think that some games kind of deal with it a lot better than others. It's always a much higher tariff than, you know, like a much more straightforward story. I know Parasite Eve has never exactly had straightforward storyline. I mean, look at Parasite Eve 1, for God's sakes. That was quite a trip. But the whole kind of, like, you know, going back in time to, you know, rewrite bits of history, but not being entirely sure the consequences you're going to make. You know, I do like that. I think it's interesting, even if it is, like, a bit far-fetched science-y, truthfully, that Aya Brea is able to do it. And it's not, like, fully explained why Aya can do it. You know, we know, I mean, it might be in the documents a little bit, and we do know from having played previous games in the series, if you have done that, it's obviously somewhat based around her mitochondrial abilities that she's had since she was young. But I don't know. I feel like not everyone can get into this sort of you know, jumping backwards and forwards sort of stuff. And I do worry there could be some plot holes that start coming with this later on. Also, the whole, like, amnesia thing for Aya is kind of a bit convenient, it does feel like. The game definitely does have quite a marked departure and basically doesn't really ever refer back, at least so far, to the previous two games. There are loose references, obviously, with Eve, and then obviously you've got Carl Madigan. There might be more. It's possible. I would love to see a Daniel Dole cameo from the first game. I expect I'm not going to see it. I'm guessing Theo is kind of filling that role, which is very, very saddening. I hope Daniel's doing alright these sort of days. I suppose this is a good segue to talk about Aya Brea herself so far in this game. I do feel like I'm walking on slightly shaky ground, so I'm going to try and be tactful here where possible. I do think part of Aya Brea's kind of identity throughout the series is that she's a bit more of a nuanced character than I think some other protagonists throughout video gaming. I think the fact that she does have, obviously, like the mitochondrial abilities, which, you know, basically keep her body younger than it realistically should be, because it's just beneficial for them, does make her feel a lot more out of place. You know, and this is reference, you know, like look in the mirror, saying that sometimes she looks in the mirror like she just sees a stranger, and that she struggles to identify sometimes who she is and what she is in relation to everyone around her, that she is not the same, and that she does struggle to deal with that. And this has been a thing ever since she first learned about that, and definitely was featured in the second game as well. But with that being said, I have been a little surprised that she hasn't been a little bit more forceful so far in this game. Now, this might be changing. We did see at the very end, like, she's a bit more assertive of her coming out the cell as she's kind of learning more about her. And I can get that, maybe. You know, you're struggling to remember who you are. Like, you're going to be perhaps a bit more pensive. But, like, for those of us that have been through the series, like, I have been through 2 games of this. Whether she remembers or not, I don't necessarily know. But, like, you'd think she'd be a bit more kind of... She doesn't have to be like a Jill Valentine or like a Regina or hell, even a Lightning. You know, it doesn't have to be anything like that. But I just feel like, how is she not saying to him, look, if you want me to help you sort this situation out across America, let me out this fucking cell or go screw yourselves. Like, there hasn't been any bite to her at all so far, which has been a bit jarring. Especially, again, knowing the stuff she's gone through. Again, yeah, alright, fine. This is it's like a decade afterward. It's kind of a soft reboot of the series. I guess that's fine, but if you're doing that, don't you want to have, like, your lead protagonist have a bit of something about them, rather than just being kind of very meek and passive, and lots of kind of uhs and ahs, and lots of little sounds here, like it's like I'm watching an anime here. I just don't think that's particularly suited Aya at all. And that's not a knock on the voice actor at all. I just don't feel like it's been a particularly... I feel like you could have advertised a little bit better. Now, I guess you could advertise, you know, I'll get into the clothing. Don't worry, I'll get into that in a moment. But yeah, I'm surprised they didn't just have a bit more of it. She doesn't have to be like full-on action heroine, but I just feel it's been way too skewed in the other direction, and that has been a little disappointing so far. And I am definitely hoping to see more from that as we go. But, you know, I mean, I guess that's kind of just, it is a little bit, you know, Ivory has always been kind of a bit unique in how she's, you know, kind of presented in the games as well, which does get on to, like, the whole clothing thing, which I've got to say, I don't think has aged particularly well. I don't know necessarily where all the inspiration that came out from, but, like, the whole clothing and, like, your clothing damage system and stuff like that. Look, it's just... Aya Brea has always been kind of a bit more tied to, like, sexuality. Go look at some of the official promo images for Parasite Eve 1, and you'll see exactly what I mean. But it just feels kind of weird having her in this game, and, like, you know, like, easy takedowns, like, the jeans are getting ripped away and stuff like that. You could argue and say, oh, realism, Shadow. Well, if it's realism, why do almost most other video games era not do it? And I do think it's not ideal, and it is kind of a bit objectifying, being honest. I did read, apparently there was an interview with one of the developers or something, one of the designers, like with the clothing and such, was saying, well, we thought we'd make the game a little bit harder, but to make sure that people aren't just deliberately taking damage of Aya to see more skin or something like that. And I'm like, if you got to that stage, maybe you should just rethink the entire system. You know, maybe that's the problem here, not the players. I don't know. And this is even getting into, like, some of the clothing outfits that you can get hold of in this game. I believe for the first playthrough, you only ever get the 2 outfits we've got, just the vest and the white jacket above it. But there are some real wild outfits out there, and some of them are, like, kind of... It's not aged well. That's all I will say. It's a minor thing. It's something that I'm not really going to be worrying about in this game, but it is kind of creepy. I'm not going to lie. One last thing I want to talk about before I end this little kind of review video, if you will, and that is talking about kind of the game's its difficulty and playability. I am very glad that I spent a short half of the video early in this series to kind of sample the different difficulties available to you. And I've got to say that the jumps between, like, normal and hard mode were a lot starker than I was expecting, and there's hard difficulties available for you beyond that. When you beat the game, you get access to more trickier difficulties. And it does lead into something that I do think the game tries to do, and sort of kind of relies on a bit. It is somewhat relying on players, I think, playing through the game more than once. Just the way it's kind of built with, like, the way the RNG system works and kind of the RNG beyond that. And like the difficulty stuff and whatever else. Again, I don't know if there's any New Game Plus stuff. It's possible that there is. Like, if you beat the game, you get some benefits to help you survive hard defeats. I don't know. I simply don't have an answer to that question. But I'm a little surprised they went this direction. I guess it is more of a portable gaming thing, that games are more trending towards being replayable. It's not a field I can particularly attest to. I never really had a portable game device. I never PSP, didn't have like a 3DS, any of that when I was growing up. So I don't really know. But out of the few that I've sampled over the course of time, they do tend to definitely favor, like, encouraging the player to, once you beat it once, play the game again. And this game's way of doing it is to, like, obviously open up the hard difficulties and that sort of thing. You've got the feat system to go back and try and get certain bits and pieces going on. I just don't know if it suits this sort of game, truthfully told. I mean, you could argue, like, Parasite Eve 1 had some degree of that. You did have the tower, I forget the name of it, that you unlock after a first playthrough, which has, like, the 77th floor tower, which has the crazy zoo boss at the end. I won't talk about that for spoiler reasons. But definitely, I think, I can see what they're going at with this. But would I play this game again and then willingly try and play this again on, like, hard or beyond that with what I've experienced from, like, the boss fights? Not without some serious, like, persuading. Maybe it's just me. And again, I'm playing this on a PS2 controller and a bigger screen. Like, if I'm playing this on a PSP, I'd have even a harder time of it because the controls are a bit weird. It's a much smaller screen. The refresh rates, that's something I can't really see too much of what I'm doing. But there's a lot of modern conveniences that I've got for the purpose of this series that you just didn't have 12 years ago. And I think this should definitely be reflected. So, my opinion on that might change potentially by the end of this. Don't know. We'll see. But overall, I think with all that being said, I think my opinion of this game is, you know, it's trending positive. I do think the pros outweigh the cons and slightly creepy. And again, I've not even really talked about the shower cutscene. I don't need to. Yes, it's a reference to, like, Parasite Eve 2. And yes, I've seen significantly worse things than some cyber of Iron Brain. Like Road to Retribution exists, and that game is wholly more offensive than anything I've seen in this. But it just feels a bit weird, doesn't it? There's, like, you know, having characters kind of, like, expressing sexuality, and then there's just kind of, like, being creepy, and this game walks a very fine line. But regardless, during my time so far, I am glad that I chose to play this on normal instead of hard. Even if some of the battles, like the general fights, are a bit too easy at times, I do find. It's just the difference between, like, the normal fights around and the boss fights are just staggeringly different. Like, they are in different stratospheres. And I don't know why they're so jarring between themselves. I think even if they made, like, the general combats a little harder, or made the boss fights a touch easier, they were just a bit more near each other, I'd probably play it on hard. But just, again, from my experience of the boss at the end of Chapter 1, and, like, going through Club Sacrifice, which was a little tricky, but I did alright, apart from the one occasion on the stairs, where I was on my own. I was just getting shot to pieces by those freaking blob things. But up now I was okay. I got through the big twisted boss fight not too bad. But yeah, I then went to take on Jefferson, and just got slaughtered for nearly an hour. And I was just like, this isn't going to do for me. And I'm not going to sit around and just, like, grind for, like, an hour to be in a better position to do that. You don't even gain that much health when you level up. Like, leveling up basically lets you get hold of higher amounts and higher quality of over energy chips that you can use. And the damage you're doing does give you experience towards like getting better upgrades, but that's about it really. Leveling up is, other than that, don't do a whole lot for you. So, you know, it's a bit of a weird one. But yeah, we'll see what more comes out of this game. I'm hoping that it will, you know, it will continue on what's been good so far. I am somewhat concerned that the story is about to start getting really, really wacky. That is a concern. It may or may not be well-founded, and we'll have to see how that develops. But, you know, it's been okay so far. I can see why some folks aren't a fan of this game, and I can definitely see if you're kind of a bit more beholden to the first game, and I guess the second as well, for, you know, the problems that game had. And believe me, it had its problems. I can see why this kind of very stark departure is a bit jarring. But, you know, so far, I think this game's been okay. Trending towards alright. But we still got some distance to go. So yeah, that's my thoughts on this game so far. You may or may not agree with any of that. But I like to think when I do these sort of things and these videos for like these games, I talk about stuff, you know, be it this, or like my Devil Friends Evil 2 remake, Troubleshoot as well. I like to think that where I'm critical, I like to think that I at least establish why I'm critical of something and how I think something could be a little bit better than what it is. You know, it just, you know, I feel like the game is trending towards being stronger towards the back end, but we'll see. Anyways, thanks for listening to me ramble for like 15 minutes, however long this video has gone on for. Longer than that, 20 minutes, Jesus Christ. Next time, we'll go around the CTI building. We'll play around with our weapons and such. We need to test out the shotgun short barrel to see if that actually makes a difference. I'm not convinced it does, but we'll see. We'll get ourselves ready for the third chapter of the game. Thanks for watching, everyone, and screw Hunter Orbit.